Do people refuse to listen to you? Maybe they've been completely unreasonable. Or they've been spreading rumors about you. Do you know what will solve all of this? A bulldozer. Fitted with top of the line armor, guns, and cameras. Slow driver, bulldozer. Dog took a shit in your yard, bulldozer. Maybe pesky senile neighbors, bulldozer. Any problems in your life? Well, have you tried driving a bulldozer through it?
This is exactly what Marvin John Heemeyer did to the town of Granby, Colorado. He was a muffler shop owner, a welder, and an auto repairman. In 1989, Marvin moved to Grand Lake, Colorado. This was 16 miles outside of Granby, Colorado, where the incident took place. Marvin had planned to move there, buy up a property, lease it out to a friend, and open a shop, as well as multiple franchises around the area. He was a businessman to the core. He wanted to open as many shops as he could, and he had multiple shops throughout the state. He chose to stand up for the legalization of gambling within Grand Lakes and its surrounding region of within Colorado because he felt that the region did not have a pre-existing proper economy. Legalized gambling would provide a much better method of income for the local communities. In 1992, Marvin plans to expand his business into Granby, Colorado. Here, he attends an auction for local lands. Here, he plans to bid on this 2-acre plot which was up for sale, and he gets into a bidding war with a local man by the name of Cody Doshev. Marvin manages to pay 42 grand for this 2-acre plot, and according to some reports, Cody was livid by this. Apparently, he was a previous owner of this plot and he was hoping to get this plot for dirt cheap just because no one in the local community would be bidding against him. As an outsider, Marvin was completely unaware of any of these situations and just bought the plot right under Cody's nose. When Cody approached Marvin about this, he had berated Marvin, and Marvin had even offered to sell the plot back to him for 60 grand. But Cody absolutely did not agree to any of Marvin's offers and refuses to make any deals and leaves. This incident is just the flashpoint of a much larger problem that is going to be like a domino effect. And it all starts because Cody Doshev did not expect outsiders to be bidding on plots and was very confident that his influence within the local community assured that nobody else would buy this land. It was at this point that the conflict between Marvin and the town council came to a head. They had informed Marvin that he would need to connect to the local main sewage line, and it was a massive expense for Marvin. He would nearly be paying almost double the price that he had paid for the land itself to connect it to the main sewage line. And this was where he felt that this was an extortion by the local government fiat. In 1997, Marvin had already established a shop. Cody Doshev absolutely refused to come to any agreement and had started looking for other plots that he could buy around. They were going to establish Mountain Park Concrete, a concrete batch production plant which would need a massive amount of land, and they end up buying the plot which is right next to Marvin's shop. Here, by this time, Marvin has ended up getting an appraisal on his land for $250,000, and Cody refuses to acknowledge any of this and absolutely will not pay anything. They keep on having this back and forth, and as time goes on, The appraisals keep getting higher. Cody will absolutely not agree to any of this. And Marvin keeps feeling that his land is increasing in value and he is being scammed out of whatever possible resolution this problem has. They are just two hard headed individuals who will absolutely not budge at whatever assumption they have of this problem. In 1998, Marvin had started approaching his issues with the sewer district as well as the town council legally. Now, it was at this point that the sewer district, led by Ron Thompson, brother of the mayor Dick Thompson, who was a close friend of Cody Doshev, told him that it would cost him $90,000 to connect his land to the main sewer line. And he would need an easement from his next door neighbors, Cody Doshev, and they would need to allow him to lay his pipe across their land.
What did he say?
For $20,000 per acre of land that is crossed. Now, here they come to an agreement that an easement will be provided. The caretaker or the owner of Mountain Park Concrete, and a man known as Gus Harris, agrees to this settlement between the lawyers, the town council, and Marvin. Marvin and Gus Harris have a complete breakdown of communication, and they just are not able to come to an agreement about their easement, him being able to connect to the sewer mains, and the ongoing construction at the southwest side of Marvin's plot by the Mountain Park Concrete guys. So there are some alleged reports where, due to their construction happening there, they ended up causing a backflow of sewage into Marvin's shop that ended up causing sewage to fill into Marvin's own that causes sewage to fill into Marvin's own building. And this infuriates him, and as he proceeds to then make another legal attempt of getting this easement and approaches the town and sewage board, they tell him that no such agreement has been made. And as his lawyer tries to get the minutes of the meeting, they also find out that no record of these easement agreements was kept and allegedly has been removed from record. A lot of these minor details that I'm providing, such as what were the legal issues, what happened exactly in meetings, and what were the sort of estimates of value, as well as the actual activities that were happening, comes from the tapes that Marvin left for the world to listen to. So I think a bit of it has to be taken with a grain of salt. He was a deeply distressed individual, so I don't think you can just take his word, and it needs to be seen as a proper, breakdown of what actually happened. So I have tried to consolidate this with investigation reports, what was reported in the local newspapers afterwards, and Marvin's own accounts. So some are from the side of the businesses and Cody and these guys and the local the local media, and some of it comes from Marvin's records of what actually happened in all of these legal battles and his own personal problems with the local people. Because I think since this is a major conflict that takes place between these guys, it is very important that we actually assess it from all aspects.
I can assure you, the outcome, the concrete plant, the whole thing would have been completely different. I'm not saying I'd have been that much happier, but I would have never found out that they tried to fuck me. If they would have let me alone, I wouldn't have had this righteous anger that I have towards the Thompsons, their hierarchy, their attitude that they have left in that community for so many years, that has spread and like a cancer through that community, and so many people think like they do. Screw your neighbor.
In 2001, Mountain Park Concrete, in the plot that was southbound of Marvin's own, they had constructions to make gravel pits. Now, all things aside, that construction for gravel pits has been argued that was a clearly petty sort of a decision, because they could have moved those gravel pits even within the original plot, and that land seemed to have been given a special zoning to make it into a gravel pit for Mountain Park Concrete. Now, it was because of this that Marvin also had to legally fight for these zoning laws. But this had been passed in such a way, and the zoning laws had been so obscure, and all the actual legal proceedings had taken place in such a short time, that Marvin had about 30 days to figure out what these procedures were and then fight these laws. Here came a big issue. By the time Marvin and his legal team were even able to figure out what had happened and how they had managed to get these sort of zoning permits passed so quickly, they absolutely did not have the time to fight this. So Marvin ends up losing this zoning issue immediately. Because of this zoning problem, Marvin does not have access to the road which brings any sort of customers from the main to his shop. Here, if you see the map, you will notice that those access roads were the only way Marvin was connected to the town. And as a business that was an automobile repair business, that sort of accessibility is incredibly important. Mountain Park Concrete cuts off this road to build their gravel pits, cutting off any possible way of Marvin's business functioning and getting a decent flow of these customers. No matter how you see, I absolutely find this to be a malicious act. I mean, fight this man all you want, but you are literally making him lose any sort of way of making a living and feeding himself. Fine, Marvin does not have a family. He has a lot of other businesses. He is able to provide for himself. But these kind of malicious acts are absolutely unacceptable. Marvin had tried to take these guys on legally after this, where he tried to get a lot of public attention, petitions, and try and actually fight this in any way that he could, actually legally approach it. Whether it was the zoning, whether it was the actual presence of a concrete plant that close to a town. Because there were some other townsmen who had complained that the dust and the noise from the concrete production was being blown downwind into the town. They had had these issues before. This was not the first time that the Doshev family had tried to create a concrete plant, and that is the collapse that led to them buying this new plot. Marvin, according to him, lost $150,000 on just the legal fees of trying to fight this zoning issue.
I stood there and fought till the end. I spent the money. I let that attorney Dietza milk me because I was fearful. I was weak. Understood. I spent the money. I fought the good fight. To come to realize that I had to do what I have to do now.
Another year down the line, having not connected his land to the main sewage line, Marvin was being charged by the sewage council $100 a day, and he was just deemed guilty. There was no proceedings that were being done, and when he was informed of these fines, he absolutely did not accept what was happening. It took him a year, because he just could not get out of this, that he ended up writing a check to these guys. Marvin wrote to them that he was going to pay them the $3,351 marked for the cowards and liars department. But even after receiving this, they absolutely did not accept this money and they wanted him to write another check. Marvin had had enough of this and absolutely just refused to send any money to them and did not even want to write another check. This was just a complete breakdown of any communication between Marvin and anybody from the town. It was at this point where a local newspaper by the name of Sky High News allegedly had started printing editorials which painted Marvin in a terrible light. They were concerned with his initial attempts for the legalization of gambling. Then they were also focused on him as a nuisance to the local community, as an interference to these businesses that were being opened by these Doe Chef, Thompson families. This just did not sit well with Mark. He felt everybody was just against him, and there are conflicting reports that any sort of coverage that was being done by the local newspaper was actually being done in respect to the conflict between the community in legalization of gambling and not anything to do with the local businesses. But at this point, Marvin just felt that irrespective of who it was, they were just against him. Even if everybody in the town was not against Marvin, the people that represented the town and their actions made it a really hostile environment for Marvin. I mean, his own actions were clearly not helping. He too was a complete hard-headed individual who just did not budge from whatever conclusions he came to. But these individuals made Granby such a hostile environment that Marvin felt that there was a grand conspiracy against him. And even if you don't believe there was one, it is hard to argue that when even the local community and the people that you are in conflict with, everyone takes such actions, it is hard not to feel cornered.
Otherwise, you're the problem. It's your fault that this happened, not mine. You know, you can blame me all you want. You can blame the FDIC. That isn't the problem. You have got to learn to get over it and move on. But no, you sat there and plotted with the Thompsons to keep me down, to not allow me onto the water and sewer district, to not sell me that property, to sell it to Cody, to do this stuff and to get even with me. You developed malice towards me. I never had any malice towards you.
Marvin was willing to rebuild the access road completely on his own. He bought materials. He bought a bulldozer, a Komatsu 355A, and he was ready to do all of the work himself. His attempts were stopped by the local government. They fined him $2,500 for all the auto repair and junk cars on his plot of an auto repair shop that did not have a road. What was Marvin supposed to do? Man, fuck do I know. If you're listening to the tapes, I think it was around this point where Marvin's, I'd say his psyche just snaps, right? And he starts to feel just completely cornered. There is just no legal way of him getting out of this problem. And he starts feeling that at this point, everything is just divine intervention, and anything that happens is a plan of God, and he is just supposed to go along with it.
That the peace, I mean, I wept at times trying to understand why this was happening to me. And to do what I had to do to make these people listen, to learn, was just above me. And when I realized that one day, when I was sitting in the hot tub, and I mean I was weeping, a peace came over me that has only come over me a few times before in my life, where I knew that what I was doing was tough, but it was the right thing, and that it was above me. It wasn't me. I was doing this because God wanted me to do it. And I didn't understand it. I said, why did you ask me to do this? Is that why I've never been married?
I think it was at this point where reason just did not exist. He planned to do whatever he did here onwards, and all his actions, although premeditated, come from an incredibly broken individual who could not rationalize all of his issues other than just divine intervention. Marvin decided to just let go of his existing life. He starts selling off his cabin. He starts selling off this plot of his that caused all of this problem. He first manages to lease it and then sell it for $400,000. He also manages to sell all the equipment that he's gathered for the construction of the road, for the work in the shops, anything. Here, he also tries to sell the Komatsu D355A, which just does not sell. He lowers the price, does not sell. He absolutely tries selling it for dirt cheap, and it just wouldn't sell. So he decides to put it into his shop, and as he's putting it into his shop, it fits by barely an inch. And immediately Marvin thinks, sign from God. He starts reminiscing about the fact that there were so many other bulldozers he could have bought that were cheaper, that were stronger, maybe that would have done the work better, but he bought this particular model. This was a sign from God. Once he had locked himself away and started working on this bulldozer, he was visited by attorneys and land agents to talk about what was happening with his property. None of these guys managed to notice the fucking 40-ton bulldozer with a mounted armor, because this man put a tarp over it. And he was living inside his garage at this point. What did Marvin think was happening? Sign from God.
I've given my snowmobiles, I've given those away this year. Everything is gone. What I own is just going to be a pittance compared to what I'm going to take. But hopefully the community will learn something from this and become wiser. And it looks like it's going to be. Because the one thing that I have wanted to do is get caught. I had hoped that somebody would catch me and that this whole thing would stop.
He, at this point, set up a separate entire business to order all the equipment he would need to make these modifications. He had ordered guns, he had ordered steel platings, he had ordered concrete, and absolutely no one came to check what was happening here. He had gone missing for weeks and would just sit in that shop doing construction on this absolute behemoth. And not a single person notices what is happening. Multiple people visit, not a single person sees what's going on. Marvin thinks, sign from God. At this point, Marvin was deeply hurt about the way the people around him had behaved. So, there was a very famous quote by Marvin that people really latched onto.
I hope that the people of Granby learn that the way you punished me over the years that I was down there and how you punished me, for the most part, turned me into a desperate man. And desperate men do desperate things to recover a lot of times.
His statement to address the entire problem was also something that people had connected to on a very personal level. He had tried to summarize his problems and he had said that
I have had a perfect life up until 1999 when I found out what the Thompsons had done to me in 92. And I am not going to take it. And I have to use the resources that I have, the wherewithal that I have, the ability that I have, the knowledge that I have to make this right. I am not walking away from it. Maybe I'm being a coward by doing what I'm doing, because without a doubt, I'm doing what you have done. I'm lying. I'm conspiring. I'm keeping things secret. And it's going to happen. And I believe that is a coward. You were cowards in the way that you dealt with me. The 10 years that I was in Granby. You people were cowards. That you could come to me and say, Marv, we want you out of this town. We hate you. We hate the FDIC. We hate how you benefited from the FDIC's actions and our misfortune and our stupidity. But none of you had the guts to do that. You had to take me on en masse. Well, I'm going to take you on by myself. It's the only way I know how to do it. I'll be dead when it's over, but that's my conviction.
here on, I'll detail the actual modifications that Marvin did to the bulldozer itself. Starting off, he bought half-inch thick tool-grade steel to layer between almost a foot thick at certain places concrete. So there would be half an inch of tool grade steel, almost a foot thick concrete, and another half an inch of tool grade steel. He also ended up reinforcing the blades of the bulldozer because he knew that for the kinds of destruction that he was planning, he needed something far more reliable than the bulldozer would be able to provide. Here, his skills as an auto repair engineer really start to show. He ends up improving the engine's performance as well as the radiator because he had added nearly 20 tons of armor onto already 40 tons of the original bulldozer. It was at this point where Marvin said that he had absolutely no idea why, but he would put it into first gear and it would just not go. And after a certain point, his engine just started to connect to its transmission and he would just start moving. Again, Marvin said it was a sign from God. Under all of this armor, Marvin had also ended up adding an entire ventilation system where he had fans and air conditioner inside because there were no openings in this armor. Because of no openings, he also could not see out of it. So here Marvin had to install a camera system around all of the sides of the bulldozer, which was also in between almost an inch thick bulletproof glass. Here he adds small air spray nozzles to get any dust or debris out of these cameras to have as clear a vision of all around his bulldozer because there is no way he can see out of the bulldozer physically. Marvin also adds 4 gun ports on all sides. Inside the cabin, Marvin has with him a Ruger Mini 14, FN FAC assault rifle, 2 Beretta M82 anti-material sniper rifles, and a Smith & Wesson 686 handgun. After all of these modifications were done, Marvin secured all of his documents, his legal papers, his audio recordings, everything in his shop safe and the trunk of his car. He knew people after this incident would come looking, and he was prepared with everything. Marvin was so prepared that he ended up giving all of his money and property to his family. He had put everything that he had owned up for sale. He did not own a penny by the end of it. Everything that he had ever had was sold off. From his house, to his snowmobiles, to his shop, to his vehicles, to his equipment, his land, everything. Marvin knew the people would come for him, and he was ready for absolutely everything. On June 4th, 2004, Marvin Heemeyer finally lowered the armor onto his bulldozer. He had gently put this bulldozer into his garage before these modifications, but now he tore through his own walls and right towards Mountain Park Concrete. He planned on just taking down anybody and everybody who he felt had wronged him. He spent 40 minutes systematically trying to destroy Mountain Park Concrete. At some point, Cody Doshev had tried to get into another smaller bulldozer and stop Marvin from doing this. The moment Marvin realized it was Cody who was trying to stop him, he had started firing onto this bulldozer. Here, Cody just managed to escape by backing off and hiding behind the blade of his bulldozer. Here, the Killdozer plowed through two buildings. His next target was Mountain Park Electric, another business owned by the Doshev family. He also destroyed Maple Leaf Builders, who were associates of the Doshev family. As Marvin approached the town hall, he plowed straight through this building. He also destroyed the local record offices, and the next door police department was next on his list. At this point, he is actively being engaged by the police department as well as the SWAT teams. The next target was Liberty Savings Bank, after which the Killdozer set its eyes on Sky High News, the very news outlet that had allegedly made those sort of remarks and statements against Marvin when he had tried to legalize gambling, and those statements where he was obstructing those local businesses from prospering within Granby. Here, Marvin soon approaches this propane yard, and he immediately goes down into this propane yard and tries to detonate the propane tanks that are placed outdoors. Here, he hits a wall, figuratively, unlike the rest of his evening. As Marvin is trying to shoot at these tanks, he realizes that his bullets are clipping the inside edge of his armor and are unable to hit at those sort of angles to the propane yard. He tries all kinds of ammunition, he tries all of his guns, but he is unable to actually shoot those tanks. Now, after giving up, Marvin moves out of the propane yard. As Marvin is moving out of this propane yard, he is being fired upon by the police, which is now uphill, as well as he sees that a land mover is approaching him from the front. At this point, some policemen had decided that they were going to move these sort of equipments in his way and stop his bulldozer from getting out of this propane yard onto the main road and to other businesses. Here, they get into this 1v1. But absolutely nothing happens, and this land mover is just pushed out of the way like a fucking toddler. Here, Marvin had also decided that he would go on and destroy the house of the Thompson mayor who he felt had wronged him, where he proceeded to actually destroy this house. The only problem being that the old mayor had passed away 3 years ago, and only his widow lived in the house. So he razed that building for absolutely no reason. Around this time, there were reports that the police was trying everything to stop Marvin. They had tried to put plastic explosives, which did not have any effect on the armor. There was footage of a policeman getting on top of his bulldozer, firing shots point blank, and just nothing happens. They also tried to throw in a flashbang from the ventilation for the engine, but Marvin had prepared so well that absolutely nothing happened inside the cabin. There were also requests being made that the local governor request for an Apache helicopter with missiles, but sensible minds prevailed and they said no. In trying to stop the bulldozer with an Apache helicopter, you will end up destroying so much of the town that it is an absolutely useless idea. And they just moved on from there. Here, Marvin moves towards Copycat Co., a printing business where he just absolutely destroys it immediately. And during this, the radiator line for his engine breaks. You can see in the footage that he is leaking fluids and he is starting to bellow smoke as he is moving away from this building. Next to this building is the store called Grambles, where Marvin wanted to destroy this store as well because it was owned by one of the town, I think, council members, and he just absolutely wanted to enact revenge on anybody and everybody that he just felt had even the remotest connection to anything that was happening to him. As Marvin moves in towards Cramble, he starts taking down their wall and pushes into an alley. Behind Marvin, the land mover is positioned so he cannot move back out of this alley, and he proceeds to just push through the entire side wall of Cramble. As he is pushing through, the right side treads of Marvin's Killdozer drop into the basement of Grambles. After an hour of rampage, Marvin's 60 plus ton absolute monster of a bulldozer finally stopped. Here, the Killdozer was absolutely crippled. There was no tearing through this problem. There was no way that he would be able to back out of the basement. And he realized that he was surrounded by law enforcement. Just after a minute of coming to a halt, a gunshot is heard and everything goes silent. In attempting to access the cabin of the bulldozer, they had tried to use explosives, and had Marvin been alive at this point, he would have absolutely died for just the shock of these explosives. After spending 3 hours of trying to get into this cabin, somebody finally brings out an acetylene torch and begins to cut through the metal, and then manages to drill out the concrete. Again, they have to carve through with an acetylene torch the tool grade steel, and inside they finally access the cabin of Marvin Heemeyer's Killdozer. Inside the cabin, um, in his final act of, I don't know, personal freedom, Marvin had decided to commit. Can I say? Marvin had disconnected from Sober Earth. He had pulled out one of his rifles from the port and his handgun from inside the cabin and put it to the roof of his mouth and huffed the gunpowder vape, as the cool kids say. As they finally confirmed the who of this situation. The why was never in question. Everyone absolutely knew why this was happening. And even if they did not agree, they were absolutely devastated. The town had its answers well before they knew who was inside, or they could confirm who was inside. Marvin had made sure that there was no way that they could get out of this debt that he had left them with. By the end of his rampage, of all the people, the businesses, the town facilities that Marvin had destroyed, he had left Granby, Colorado with an almost $8 million debt that they just could not pay themselves. As people's interest in this incident grew, the local town did not want to keep that Killdozer anymore. It was drawing a lot of attention, and although the locals had given the idea that they should turn it into an attraction which would actually bring in money to rebuild this town, the government decided to demolish the Killdozer, to separate it into smaller pieces and have it spread out all over the state so that nobody could set up a shrine to what Marvin had done. They were already aware that he was gaining a lot of following and sympathy for his actions. As this was happening, people absolutely did not need a piece of the Killdozer to canonize Marvin as the saint of fuck around and find out. There were enough crowds who were sympathizing with Marvin. There were enough anti establishment and anti big government sort of individuals who were really connecting to what Marvin had done. They really did see Marvin as the man who, on his last legs, stood up to the government who was completely taking away his way of life, and it was the last actions of a man defending everything he stood for. The longer Marvin spent in Granby and around its people, I think it broke him down mentally. He was used to living a life far more self centered. He did not have a family, he did not have kids, and he was used to doing everything for himself. And as his ability to provide and his ability to live the kind of life that he wanted was being taken away, it slowly began to corrode at whatever was the crux of Marvin's personal life and belief. Each time he felt anybody did wrong by him, it absolutely became a grudge, and it became a mission to make sure that it was a debt that was settled. Whenever he tried to sell off his land and lease it off to a friend, maybe sell it off to Cody, sell off his equipment, and this did not pan out, he saw everything as an act of God, even down to his sewage dispute. Now, I don't know what to think about this, but I don't think God solves sewage disputes. As much as I don't feel comfortable putting the entire blame on the victims of this situation, it is hard not to see the way everything panned out as wrongdoing on their parts as well. They absolutely made living in Granby hell on earth for Marvin. It was these actions that set into motion a complete disproportionate response from Marvin to make sure that there was absolutely no way that the town would recover after what they had done to him. So Marvin was absolutely as hard-headed and greedy as the rest of this town. Honestly, they were a perfect fit for each other. They did not let Marvin have any possible options of getting out of this problem. I don't really understand what they expected if they crippled his options as a business, if they did not let him earn a living. Did they hope that Marvin would just raise his hand and be like, fuck this, I am leaving. Here's my land, here's my business, do whatever you wanted, everything for free, thank you very much, I'm leaving. None of it truly makes sense. They were disproportionate in their actions in limiting what Marvin could even accomplish in their town. And Marvin, by the end of this, had become so deeply scarred by their actions that he disproportionately responded to this. Marvin absolutely painted this problem in such broad strokes that even though he had targeted the businesses and those people that he felt were specifically responsible for the problems that he was facing, he ended up destroying all vital systems of the town itself. He had crippled whatever made Granby the town that it was, and although that was his revenge, it also truly did not leave the place livable for a lot of people. He may have got his revenge, but Marvin also did exactly what had been done to him. He destroyed all possible ways of these people being able to live in the town, and even those people who did not have anything to do with Marvin's plight were those who were being completely moved out of Granby, and his actions just led to further more people becoming another versions of Marvin Heemeyer. They couldn't just get into their muffler shops and drive a bulldozer over his buildings, right? And these families and these townspeople were completely uprooted from their life and livelihood, even if they were businesses by these very corrupt officials. The workers and the existing population of the town was left absolutely financially crippled. I absolutely would love to hear what you have to think, because I truly felt there was a lot to consider morally. Even after listening to Marvin and to all the news reports, everything, I just could not come to an honest conclusion about what the outcome of this story was. Who was right? Is there right? Is this just a morally grey story where there is just nothing that truly was gained by anybody here? But as always, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.